Welcome to tonight's meeting, being 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you join me in the pledge of the flag, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Then would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Vanderwater?
Here.
Ms. Wozniak?
Here.
Mr. Tupper?
Here.
Ms. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Sykes?
Here. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the town board meeting from October 1st, 2019.
Moved.
I'll second.
Any changes, corrections? No?
Nope.
Comments? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 1 is public hearing on local law H 2019, extension of the solar moratorium. If you remember right, about 6 months ago, almost 6 months ago, we enacted a moratorium on solar installations here in the town. We found we need a little more time, so we're requesting an extension of that moratorium. Public hearing here to hear any comments on that extension. Entertain a motion to recess the regular meeting, go into public hearing to hear comments on extension of the solar moratorium.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address this in positive? Yep, please state your name and address, please.
My name is Peter Wilder. I live at 105 Highview Drive, which is in the town of Van Buren. And I'd just like to state my support for solar, both for commercial uses, inappropriate places, and also for residential. And I know the town is rewriting the solar codes. I'd like to strongly endorse the idea that we don't, first of all, some towns have implemented large solar farms, and they kind of say, okay, that's enough solar, and they don't allow residential. So I would not like to see us go in that direction. And I think that the town should be, I appreciate the fact the town has general support for solar, it's stated in the code. I would like to see the language become even more favorable, that the town would be proactively seeking to support solar, that should be the default position of the town, is to try to implement, try to work with homeowners wherever possible. And that this process is going to need review. Whatever is decided on with commercial or residential will inevitably be out of date within a year or two. And so I would suggest that the town have, as part of whatever new laws, whether governing commercial or residential, have someone they work with who could offer, not just from an enforcement point of view, but from the point of view of how do we work with new technologies, and is this different from something we already have listed, or is it substantially the same as something that's already in our codes? And that review process would be a regular feature of any solar rules. I presented over at the ZBA last week about a ground-based, ground-mounted solar system, which is not allowed in my zoning right now. And when I mentioned that I felt that perhaps the definition in the code of ground-mounted solar, which is listed as usually large-scale commercial, I felt that that was perhaps, because that definition may have informed the planning board how to zone that area, and the attorney that was present said that may be the case. So in my case, I got turned down for the ground-mounted solar system, and I feel that if the codes were suitably written, they would make distinctions between residential ground mount and commercial ground mount. And there's a number of other new technologies, canopy style, roof tiles, believe it or not, down the road, solar paint. So there's going to be a lot of innovation that's coming forward in the next couple of years, I would say, and though some of the financial incentives for New York State are going away at the end of this year, it's entirely conceivable that, that those could come back into existence. They were already extended by 3 years. So I would just ask that whatever the process is, I know this is specifically addressing the moratorium on commercial, and I would just say I'm all in favor of it. It makes the grid more resilient. It does a public service to all of us because we don't have to pay for a new power plant from National Grid. National Grid will come swap out your meter and make it two-way, reversible. That is far cheaper to them than having to, build a new power plant that wouldn't be needed during peak operation. One of the great things about solar is it's really good in the summer, and that's also when AC is used the most. So it can be a big win-win for both homeowners and the town in general. So I just want to go on record as I'm very much in favor of solar. Thank you.
You related to Mark?
My brother.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone that's opposed to this local law? Hearing none, and entertain a motion to go back into regular session.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Back in regular session. Item number 2 is consideration of adoption of local law H 2019, which would extend the solar moratorium. You have a resolution before you. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Moved.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Or is it roll call? Yeah, roll call.
Mrs. Vandewater?
Yes.
Ms. Wozniak?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Dickman?
Yes.
Mr. Dozinski?
Yes.
Ms. Saban?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes. Okay, you got 3 months to get it done.
We've got 2 meetings coming up, which we'll mention shortly.
Okay, item number 3, entertain a motion to go into public hearing on local law I 2019, small cell wireless deployment requirements. Entertain a motion to go into public hearing, recess and go into public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Kevin, you want to explain this? I know we were handed this down from the federal government, a lot of the stuff we can't do, and this addresses stuff we can do.
Well, the resolution before the board tonight would adopt a scheme, organization of regulations for administering 5G units in the town. We are very limited in what we can regulate and what we cannot. We are only allowed to regulate in the area of aesthetics. And so this local law does that. It addresses aesthetics. And the resolution you're looking at tonight, we sent these to you last week, also contains a set of standards and guidelines that would be adopted at the same time that kind of say, how far back from the curb and where you have to cite things and such like that. Now, the difference between 5G and 4G and 3G, which is all cellular technology, is the old technology was on cell towers. And you had a cell tower every 2, 3, 4 miles, one cell tower. The 5G is something that is what they call small cell technology, which means they have a lot more of them and they're handed off very quickly, the signals. And so you might have, on a block, you might have 5 or 6 of these on a block. In the more rural areas, you might have them more often. And what they do is they normally attach those to existing utility poles, although there are occasions where that can't happen and they end up putting up their own infrastructure. Like I said, the government, the federal government, is very much in favor of this, and they're trying to beat the Chinese. So virtually anybody who gets in the way is going to be stomped on by the federal government, okay? And by the outfits that are trying to do this. But I think this gives you the ability to regulate in the area that the federal government has given you that you can operate in.
Okay. With that, anyone wishing to speak in favor? Seeing none, anyone opposed to this local law? Seeing none, entertain a motion to go back into regular session.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is consideration of adoption of local law I-2019. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Move.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I don't know how we have any option.
Kind of chain to it.
This
Yeah,
at
we-
least
we
gives us
really
some
don't.
control.
We really don't.
It's mind-boggling to me that the federal government's getting involved in cell phone service.
Well, it's the technology part of it. It drives economic development
Yeah,
and
the
everything else is
broadband.
5G.
They've been involved in this since cell phones came up.
Yeah.
The original legislation was in 1996, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which dove into what we could do to regulate towers. And I designed one of the first tower laws in New York State. And I'll tell you, that it was very hard to find the pathway that they allowed us. One thing you couldn't do, for instance, is no decisions could be made on the basis of radio frequency radiation. Of course, that's the first issue that's always raised that people get, and you saw that in Syracuse. They all get concerned about radio frequency radiation. The federal government has determined that there is no exposure and there is no risk from radio frequency radiation coming from these units. Now, they may be right or they may be wrong, but we're not allowed to question it.
Right.
It was challenged out on the West Coast, and they lost. So,
I have a feeling we're gonna more hear from residents after they see this multiplicity of,
well, it could be, but when you're really gonna hear from people is when somebody comes in and they wanna put up a system of 500 or 600 of these cells, small cells.
I think we had that objection raised on O'Brien Road. There's a tower up by there.
Probably you did.
There was.
You know, that was a while ago, probably.
That was
Oh,
a
yeah.
a new cell tower that
Probably
Verizon.
5 or 6 of the towers that I worked with in Onondaga, for instance, those questions were raised, and we just had to cut it off. We cannot consider it, it cannot be part of the record. You know, you can talk, but we're not listening. Because, you know, and at that point, once they raised that issue, if you denied it for another reason, you were automatically suspect. Because they raised a taboo issue, and then the people who were denied come back and say you denied it because of that.
So Kevin, who comes into the town and installs these cell stations?
Verizon,
So,
T-Mobile,
T-Mobile,
any of
so
them.
is it the actual cell provider that comes in and does it?
yes, usually, but they could contract it out. You know, like, American Tower used to do all of the cell towers for the companies.
So when they come in, are they going to give us a plan saying, okay, we've identified here, here, and here is where we're gonna
They-
install?
If they follow this, they will. You're
Yeah, we
gonna get a
have- We have
plan,
a small
and you're
oversight
gonna
in the
get an
permitting
opportunity
process.
to look at what their plan is, and theoretically, they're also supposed to follow your guidelines.
So they're supposed to submit sort of a plan to Claude saying, we're coming in by November, here's where we're gonna install?
Here's what we want to do. And then it has to be considered by the town and an approval given
In a timely fashion.
in a timely fashion. There's a shot clock that they put on this thing. And you've gotta answer within a certain amount of time, or, there's penalties to pay for that.
Is that by the planning board or the town board that we have to approve it?
I
Planning.
can't remember, I say that because Nadine did the lion's share of the work on designing this. But I think it's the planning board, but don't hold me to it.
Yeah, I think it
Permit
was the planning
application.
board. And so, say Verizon submits a plan and says, this is my plan, does T-Mobile come in behind and say, well, here's our plan, and then we
They could.
have 14 providers putting a cell
Well,
station
you
in?
probably aren't gonna get that many, but you could get 2 or more. You could get multiple applicants. The
And-
problem will become when they get,
Well, they co-locate on towers, and they may do the same thing on these.
yeah, the thing that will happen is, if you get a lot of them, there won't be any more room on the utility poles. And then they're gonna be looking to put up their own utility poles within the right-of-way. This all comes about as a result of the use of the official municipal rights-of-way. Now, you own all of your town rights-of-way on town roads, not on county roads, not on state roads, but on town roads, you are able to regulate those. And there'll be another document coming eventually called a license agreement. And if they go on town roads, they would have to do that. They'd have to enter into that with the town, and the town gets some money
Right.
as a result of that. So at least you're getting paid for their being there.
But it wasn't a large sum of money either.
No,
It was
not
minuscule.
gigantic, and that was specified in the legislation.
Right.
Well, not legislation, it was an order by the FCC. They gave us what the parameters were and how much you could charge without running afoul. And so we set up our legislation to capture the highest amount we could get.
And predominantly, they'll be placed on the utility poles.
I think that's where you're gonna see most of them, yes.
They can place them on top of buildings, or it's fill-in, basically, is what it is.
Yeah.
Of course,
Now,
they do-
the thing is, too, you're gonna get to a point, I remember when we were looking at these towers, and I remember one of my friends who was a town board person in Camilla said, "Oh my God, we're gonna be a pincushion." He saw all these towers just making town of Camillus into a pincushion. But as people got used to having cell phones, there was a lot more support for the cell phone. Now, I don't know if there's gonna be people that really like this 5G, get out of our way, get it done, type of thing. But I am told that this is, it's the whole new generation of cell service. It's supposed to be bigger, better, faster, more data.
Okay, thank you for,
And of course, a lot
explaining
of our areas have above, poles for utility poles.
Oh.
But there are all the new subdivisions, all the utilities are underground.
Right, and that has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. For instance, in my subdivision where I live, all the utilities are underground. Do I want to see a bunch of utility poles go up on my street that's why I bought there? I didn't want to have utilities? That's going to have to be dealt with. And we're not going to be able to say no.
It reminds me of all the telegraph poles in 1900, 12 sets of cross arms, and
You were there, right, Howard?
I do.
Well,
you leave
helped put
yourself
it up
wide
after-
open.
I couldn't,
After
You
they shut
erected
down,
most of them.
after they shut down the Pony Express, that was the next normal job.
Oh, heavens. Good, it's a good tidbit.
Kevin, can Verizon or T-Mobile, AT&T contract with local residents to put these units on their property?
Yes.
And there's really nothing we can do, because that's a contract between two individuals.
That's correct.
Do we need
So
to,
not right away, but on their own property.
do we
Yeah.
need to have people apply for a permit?
Oh,
These things are usually cabinets.
You remember when, what was it, Mobility
Yeah,
came here,
came in.
remember? They were gonna put a 200-foot pole up in somebody's front yard to relay information,
Right.
and I think Claude said,
Yeah.
not in our town. And they went away, they've disappeared. This, I think, is the alternative, that would have been like an in-between technology, where they were trying to boost the data service, and this is the next technology after mobility.
Yeah, they're cabinets about the size of a dorm refrigerator. There's several cities across the nation that's already got it, so. Any other comments?
yeah, we won't need
Discussion.
airplane obstruction lighting or anything else.
No, they'll be low,
Good.
won't be 200 feet.
No beacons.
Hey, it might be an antenna a few feet above the utility pole if they attach it at the top. On the other hand, if they attach it at the top, they're gonna risk, wind and getting blown off. And it costs them a lot of money to do those things, so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? With that, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Vandewater?
Yes.
Ms. Lozniak?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Ms. Dickman?
Yes,
Mr. Lozinski?
Yes.
Ms. Saban?
Yes,
Mr. Sykes?
Yes. Item number 5, is appointment of Casey Palmer as Codes Department Head and Fire Marshal at the rate of $30 per hour effective October 7th, 2019. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Move.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6 is approval for the supervisor to execute MVP retiree health insurance contracts. Entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll make that.
Second.
Any discussion? You're going up about 10% this year.
Do you have any idea how many retirees we have?
Lynn's probably got a better idea than I do.
About a dozen? Just curious.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a pencil in number 7. Set public hearing on the 2020 town and special district budgets for 7 PM on November 5th. No, 6th it would be, November 6th, at 7 PM. Entertain a motion to that effect.
Moved,
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Council committee reports and comments.
We have scheduled on 10/22 at 4 PM, a land use committee meeting. Rich got back to us the revised draft. It went out to everybody. I've only heard comments back from one person so far. So we're gonna continue to have that meeting on the 22nd. Hopefully come to a resolution, with the final changes, if there really are any. If we don't come to a conclusion there, we have another land use committee meeting that'll be scheduled for 10/29 at 3:30 PM. And our hope is to get this on the docket for November 6th meeting. And once we get that done, then we'll jump back into the property maintenance laws. So that's it for now.
Okay, Wendy,
Nothing.
Pat's out, controlling her cough. Ron?
No, nothing.
Darcy? Howard?
I have nothing.
Okay. Doug? Nothing. I have nothing. Jason?
Nothing this evening?
Nothing
Kevin.
additional?
Lynn? Citizens' comments. Anyone wishing to address the board? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn to November 6th at 7 PM.
Moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for coming.
That month, we're back.